the Pegasus Podcast, presented by Night Sports Now. UCF news, views, and a few hot takes. Now, here are your hosts, Bailey Go Knights Adams and Christian Charge On Simmons.
Welcome into episode 275. Be sure you're following us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at @ByCASimmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. You can also email us at PegasusPodcast@ksn@gmail.com. Big 12 Media Days were today, starting on Tuesday into Wednesday. As you're listening to this, we're 50 days away from kickoff. So naturally, we would have to do this as the Pegasus Podcast. For the third week in a row, we're starting with uniforms. The College Football Video Game 26, I don't know, butchered that, but EA CFB 26 came out, I guess the early access, but then as you're listening to this, it's the regular access. And as Eric DeSalvo hinted to us, or straight up said to us on the podcast last week when we talked to him, there were going to be some surprises in the game. One of those being the new version of Night Mode was in the game, and then Gold Pants.
Yes.
Christian.
Hi.
Speak.
Am I supposed to talk now? Oh,
Yeah.
I thought there was more to that. I didn't realize it was just my name, like it's a command. No. I'm feeling a little lied to, even though Eric did not lie to us in any way. So if you listen to last week's episode, he straight up said that there were going to be new things in the video game. I think we all understood that a new version of Night Mode was coming, in part because everyone loves Night Mode, and there was they were going to get rid of that, and also because when they released the core uniforms, they showed a Night Mode shield that then blinked at the camera, so that was a sign. In our conversation with him about the new gold and the ways it can be used, we were suspicious of Gold Pants. And I was suspicious of this. And then someone got the game the night before it came out and posted a video on YouTube of every combo for every team, which I, of course, then immediately watched the UCF section. No Gold Pants. And I was like, dang, was wrong about that. Night Mode, though. That's cool. Game drops, and UCF's immediately make sure you use our Gold Pants. So I don't know how the hell they kept them out of the game, literally the second it launched. But yeah, you see it for the gold believers who believe gold should return. It's returning in a big way. I don't know if I want to say. I guess we'll talk about the Gold Pants feel a little more noteworthy now with Night Mode, so we can talk about that first.
Yeah.
You don't want to listen to this, just click the 15 seconds ahead button a few times. And I'm judging you, and you should be staying here for this, you loser. But whatever. The thing about the Gold Pants is I'm happy Gold Pants are back for UCF. I've as much as I dislike gold jerseys, if you listen to this podcast, you always know that I believe they should have Gold Pants. I was upset because they were in the last set. They revealed them, and then they wore them one time for FAU in 2022, and they vanished from the face of the earth until they resurfaced as the team's practice pants, which is never a good sign. Mm-hmm. So they're back. What I'm confused on is the shade of gold they are in the game is a very, very yellow gold that does not match the uniforms we've seen in real life. And I've seen some fans being like, what the heck? I don't know until we see them. But based on what Eric told us on our podcast, I'm thinking they're not accurate to real life. And the other thing to keep in mind here is that the video game last year, the uniforms were perfect. The uniforms in the game were exactly what they were in real life. I think that's because they were scanned in person. I know that obviously wouldn't have happened with these because UCF, I guess, doesn't have them yet, which is what Eric alluded to and why they didn't do the photo shoot and all that. So there are weird inconsistencies in the game. The Pegasus wings don't look quite right. The Polaris stars are flat out wrong. They're not at all what they're like in real life. So I'm wondering because if you remember, Eric talked on our podcast about how I know we are so in the weeds right now and no one cares about this, but Bailey can attest to it. How many times have I texted you about Gold Pants today?
Too many.
I've gone down a rabbit hole. I had Trace Trilko, who's on the scene at Big 12 Media Days for Sons of UCF, taking photos of the jersey on the mannequin because I was trying to compare it to Vanderbilt's gold through photos on the internet. So if it is the same gold as Vanderbilt, which is what Eric said, then the pants in the video game are not right. I think they're going to be a gold that more matches the gold that we see in the uniforms in real life. So I'm excited for them if they match that way. And hopefully, I think that opens up a lot of fun combos that UCF can pull there. And I think I'm good with that, man. I'm totally good with having Gold Pants in the rotation. Yeah,
I like it. Like you said, assuming they match the uniforms, which all indications would be that they will, then yeah, I'm on board for it. If for whatever reason the version that we see in the video game or the real life version, we should just burn them immediately.
So the one thing I'm curious about is because I will say they kind of match. The video game version kind of matches because, Night Mode's that more reflective gold. So that's the only thing I can think of if they're meant to match that. But I don't know. We'll just have to. Now I'm in suspense. I'm we have to see the real life things.
Yeah.
But also Night Mode is back, which is very cool. New and improved Night Mode. It's in the new number fonts. minus the drop shadow, which I figured that they weren't going to do a drop shadow for night mode since that kind of defeats the purpose. TV numbers, the night head back on the sleeve, nothing crazy there. I'm good with that because like I feel like that's the best alternate jersey UCF's ever worn, right? Like it's the first time they've had like a true like alternate look, if that makes sense. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
I think so, yeah. And I think, that they didn't need to do much with it. And they didn't. So that's good.
No one really had an issue. And the numbers are bigger, like a lot bigger, like they are on the other one. So I'm totally, and again, this is a video game, so we'll see them in real life. But yeah, this is quite the little uniform set UCF has for themselves going into 2025. I am beginning to feel the beginnings of intense excitement over what combos we're going to see. I'm starting to think about what you might wear for different games now that we kind of have the whole set. They can go so many freaking ways. I'm excited.
What does feel curious, we should, I guess, mention for some people who love and hate it, is the old version of light mode is in the game, but there's no new version. So are we left to believe maybe that UCF has just the 3 jerseys, which would be a departure from where we've been in the past? But I don't know.
I am taking that as light mode is dead. I don't have like the scoop on that. I just am assuming light mode is dead. We didn't see it last year either. JP Gilbert won. Congratulations to JP.
Practice mode.
I will remind you that when UCF debuted their new uniforms in 2022, they debuted 3 jerseys and added light mode a year later. So
that is true.
Who knows?
This could be
either that or they run out for North Carolina and Pewter, and it's the happiest day of my life. It's hard to say.
Yeah, it could be a delayed troll of JP, and practice mode could return in 2026.
What if it was like for the first game, like for Jacksonville State? They're just like, by the way, light mode is back, and come running out in it.
Yeah, I don't know. But is there anything else uniform related that we need to?
For the sake of our sure, but for the sake of our audience, I think it's time to move on.
All right, let's move on. Let's move on to Big 12 Media Days and peek behind the curtain. For most of the early afternoon, as Scott Frost spoke on the large podium, and we got some content of players speaking, and obviously shout out to the Sons of UCF duo that is on the scene there. And Adam doing the one-on-ones with Coach Frost and with Miles Montgomery, and also Lee Hunter, more to come, obviously. You and I were texting, like, we're not going to have a lot of anything to talk about on this podcast because most of what Scott Frost said on the podium, and even really in the one-on-one, there was just kind of some good stuff, but also a lot of stuff where just what you would expect him to say. And then out of nowhere, apparently he just went scorched earth. I don't know to who. I guess we didn't even really get a source out of this one other than Chris Vanini was the one who tweeted it. So maybe Vanini got a one-on-one with him. I'm not sure. But the first thing to cover here was Chris Vanini's tweet, or the quote itself, it says UCF coach Scott Frost and what he learned from Nebraska. Quote, "Don't take the wrong job." So that was led to a lot of reaction from Nebraska fans. And then Vanini comes back.
Tweet, that's only been up for 2 hours, by the way, has 3,500 likes right now. So
it has 656,000 views. So there's that. Lord. And then he said, I said I wouldn't leave UCF unless it was someplace you could win a national championship. I got tugged in a direction to try to help my alma mater and didn't really want to do it. It wasn't a good move. I'm lucky to get back to a place where I was a lot happier. So as you pointed out on Twitter, UCF fans kind of already got this vibe, not maybe in such plain terms, but in similar terms. What I'm confused about is the departure from that article that Andrea Adelson put out like a month ago, where he was like, I don't want to answer questions about Nebraska. I'm probably going to get hundreds of questions about it. It's just better if I don't talk about it. That's out the window. Funny.
He went from I'm not here to talk about Nebraska to let's talk about Nebraska a little bit.
Yeah.
There is
so
I'm glad. Well, I'm not glad. He shouldn't have done this, and it's a problem. But I'm sure we've discussed this on the podcast. You and I, like, our like absolute peak heyday of covering the team was like, well, for me it was a little different, but like 2017, because we were students in college. So, and that was like, since I was a journalism major, that's kind of what I was supposed to do. So I got to basically just be around the team all the time, all day, every day. And it frustrated me at the time and in the years following of like the myth versus the reality of Scott Frost's departure from UCF, because the myth, which was believed by everyone outside of Orlando and even most people in Orlando, was that it was just any G5 story. He had a really good season at a G5, so now he's moving up to a very good Power 5 job. Nebraska, guys, any way cut and dry, very good Power 5 job. And that was it. That was all there was to it. Of course, he was going to leave. And what we knew, because we were around the team and because everyone around the team knew at the time, was that it was an agonizing decision. And it even seemed like at points toward the end there, even when it was clear he was going, that it seemed like he didn't want to leave. That's been, and in the years since, as time, just like anything, as time passes, people become more comfortable talking about stuff. That's become more and more public, that he really didn't want to leave. I think he knew he was going to leave eventually, like he said in that second quote, that if a real national championship, I don't think he wanted to go to Nebraska, even though it was on his alma mater. We've talked about before the YouTube video that's now gone of him doing the coaching clinic, saying that his style of offense wouldn't work at a place like Nebraska. Like it didn't want to go, whatever. Saying it now is a choice, because Scott Frost just became the story of Big 12 media days, and he somehow managed to have ESPN tweet about him, have On3 tweet about him. And I want to just say really quickly, I'm glad he feels that way. It is very cool to have a coach who we've somehow stolen his heart from his own alma mater. But Nebraska fans are very angry, and I get it, because the example I gave to you would be, what if one day Mackenzie Milton became UCF's head coach, which at this point in time doesn't feel like that off the table as the thing that could happen eventually. What if he became UCF's head coach? Think of how hyped everyone would be. What if he failed and then resurfaced 2 years later and was like, I never wanted to coach that school? Like, we would be devastated and angry about it. So like, I'm not faulting any Nebraska fans who are pissed about seeing those comments, because I would be pissed if I was a Nebraska fan and I saw those comments.
And when you brought this hypothetical up to me, what did I say?
You said, I don't want to put myself in the shoes of a Nebraska fan, so I don't care.
I don't care to do it. Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things, like, again, we knew this. It was a choice to say this on Big 12 media days, especially after saying, like, I guess you had to get him in the right setting, because on the podium, he said nothing really of substance. He said he opened up a little bit more with Adam on the Sons of UCF. Like he actually talked about the team a little bit, and that was more down to UCF specific questions. Because when he's on the podium, he kind of gets a lot of like, your thoughts on this. Like somebody asked him about Rich Rodriguez going back to West Virginia and Scott Frost, and they asked him about Sean McVay and the Rams and all that stuff. So Adam was able to ask him some more like UCF centric questions. But then, this just happens, and we're like, okay, so I guess now that's going to be aggregated everywhere. And here's Scott Frost just talking about how much he hated Nebraska and didn't want to go there. And it's a weird, like, we're talking about something that has not really been a story for at least 3 years now, like ever since he got fired there. And now
Don't take the wrong job as a quote. I got tugged in a direction to try to help my alma mater and didn't really want to do it is insane. And there's two. Let's psychoanalyze why Scott Frost said these things. I have two things. The first is that it's a mistake everybody makes, and just because I've been in media, I understand that like people think that your words hold more weight on the setting. Like if it's a press conference, holds more weight. Anything you say can be broadcast out, and I wonder if just maybe. If it was a one-on-one with Chris Vanini, maybe that didn't feel in the moment. It just felt more intimate. It didn't feel like that was going to get tweeted out immediately. Vanini did nothing wrong, by the way. He said it on the record. I want to be clear about that. The only other thing I can think of is that every time Frost has done any kind of media in the, 8 months now he's been back with UCF, the first or second question, if they're not local media, is like, what happened in Nebraska? And like, was this just one question too many? Like, was he finally just sick of being asked what he learned about Nebraska?
And almost Nebraska? To an extent, I mean, I don't know if this is going to work out this way, but I almost feel like him giving this kind of answer to that question, I don't know if anybody's going to ask him any more about it.
Oh, I bet they will, because now it's like, what else is Scott going to say?
I don't know.
Coach, was Adrian Martinez bad? Like now it's just like it's all on the table.
So
it doesn't. It bothers me because I like listen, guys. And a lot of UCF fans are going to bat for Scott Frost, as you should. He's the head coach. That's what you do when you're a fan base. You fight with their fan bases. The funniest thing has been all the other Big 12 fan bases going for Scott Frost because they all hate Nebraska from when they were still in the lead, and they're just like, yeah, Nebraska sucks, bad school. But I don't love that now. This like UCF's head coach managed to be the story from the first day of Big 12 media days, and it has nothing to do with UCF. That's not ideal, but it just kind of is what it is. It's not that big of a deal. It'll probably be forgotten within a couple days, like everything in these modern news cycles.
Yeah. And if Nebraska fans were going to root for him in his second stint at UCF, they're not anymore. The other thing.
Let me also say, I'm still in the camp that I think it is most likely that Scott Frost at UCF Part 2 doesn't work long term. guys, until we see it proven otherwise, I think we have to say it's not going to happen, but the most likely outcome. If they just are randomly great again, it just became so much more funny. Like it's just going to be so hilarious if they're just randomly great again. But anyway, yeah,
that is true. Yeah. So then that was like that. We're like, all right, we'll talk about the Nebraska quote. Like, kind of crazy that he said that, right? Then ESPN College Football drops another quote of his that, again, I don't know when he said this or who he said this to, because he didn't say it on the podium and he didn't say it on the ESPNU panel that I watched him on. He said, quote, "Right now, things are decided on the field, but way before that, they're decided in bank accounts." And it says UCF head coach Scott Frost on the current state of affairs in college football. So that was a quote that, I mean, he's not wrong, but I mean, I don't know what you gain by saying it.
I don't get what he gains by saying it, because the quote isn't even in the vein of stuff he said to us during spring of, there's tampering or it's always a bidding war. This comment was like, players are getting paid. It's like, well, yeah, we know they've been getting paid for a while. This quote unfortunately struck me as like we did all this 3 years ago when this all started happening, but this is Frost's like first go around with it. So he's like, did you know the players are getting paid? It's like, yeah, like I have no idea what's to be gained from saying that. I'm sure. And listen, I get it. I'm sure it's frustration coming out because Chase and Johnson somehow transferred away from UCF twice in the same portal cycle. So like, I understand this must be remarkably, UCF in the same portal cycle lost Chase and Johnson to both SMU and USC. I still can't get over that.
Then he came back and they lost him to USC again.
Yeah, came back and did spring ball and then was like, actually, never mind. Thanks for spring, but I'm gone. So like, if you're a coach, and I know like it must be seriously during the portal cycle, it must be every single day players come in your office and saying, hey, Texas Tech, whatever, or this school, whatever. And that must just be a nightmare. But like, so I get the frustration comes out, but every school is dealing with this. It's not new information. You're just making yourself another poster child for like grumbly coach thinks players shouldn't be paid, which I don't think is the camp he's in. It's just how that quote reads when it's posted like that.
It was also, I don't remember, I think this was when he was talking to the guys on ESPNU on the panel. He said something along the lines of like, talking about like the salary cap, and he's like, well, if they ever figure that out, like right now, we have no idea what's going on. Like, I don't know. He just, which like I get, but again, like, I don't know. It's not really a productive addition to the conversation. It's more just
it freaks me out. It freaks me out because it's the same, and I don't mean to like, it's like everyone's excited season's about to be here, and I'm like, let's get negative as hell because that's kind of the point of the Pegasus podcast. But it's like, I don't want to do the Gus thing again, because it's clear that Frost just doesn't want anything to do with this world, and I get that. I think most current college football coaches don't want anything to do with this world, but as we learned with Gus, like the whole, I just want to tune that out and just coach football. It doesn't work. And like, I'm worried because everything Frost has said publicly is implied that's what he plans to do. I think we're just banking on it. I think we're banking on UCF having a different infrastructure now. They have more player personnel and off-field type guys than they did under Gus. And there's a cap now. There's rev share. Things are a little more above board. They're directly through the school now. So technically like Mahajer and the athletics department could handle a lot of that negotiation type stuff. Whereas before, since it's through a collective, it's all like calling up boosters and you got to help us out and please all this and that. And UCF says they fully funded rev shares. That just be like money in the bucket, whatever. So maybe it's different, but it's still just like, you got to just come to terms with like, yeah, it sucks, but it's also just the way it is.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's frustrating. I think just like, I think to me, it's like, I know his frustration's coming out, but like you said, like, it's not, it's like the thing with the Nebraska thing is like, I didn't want this quote to be like part of the big story of the day either. Like, I know it doesn't help anything. And
which to be totally clear, UCF, I don't think there's anything UCF could do to become a story other than their coach saying incendiary things, but yeah.
Yeah. But this again, like, I'm fine. This isn't the year for UCF to be a story at media days to me, but I don't know. I was going to ask you to kind of break up because those were two pretty heavy quotes and crazy things. I was going to ask you, what were your thoughts on UCF season in which they went 4-8, but also started 2-4 and won 6 of their last 7 games before losing to the Texas Bowl or losing to LSU in the Texas Bowl?
If you don't
thoughts on that graphic.
If you don't know what we're talking about while discussing UCF, they put up a graphic recapping UCF's 2024 season, which according to ESPN included their loss to LSU in the Texas Bowl. If this all seemed familiar to you, it's because they literally – I don't understand how this happened. It starts as UCF and like that's all Baylor. That's all stuff Baylor did, and it somehow became about Baylor at the end, but it was very funny. I was really upset you saw that because I saw that and hoped you had not. And I immediately texted you and said, was UCF's bowl game this year difficult for you?
And what's funny is it didn't even register with me that you were talking about that.
I know, and then I got excited because you were, what do you mean? And then I replied with the graphic, and you were like, I saw that. I'm like, damn it.
Oh yeah, no, I because you texted me like you sent me 4 things in a row, and then one of them saying, "Who are you rooting for in UCF's bowl game?" By the way, I know that's tough for you. I'm like, I went to Twitter and I was like, did somebody else ask me about the 2018 Fiesta Bowl or 2019, whatever? And I didn't have it, so I was like, what are you talking about? And I saw the graphic, and then it slipped my mind that quickly. And didn't even pick up on the joke at all.
It looks so funny. I literally, the graphic I'm looking at, it goes UCF 2024 recap, 4-8 record, 2-7 in Big 12, 1-6 of the last 7 games.
Yeah, that's great.
What a season.
I do now want to talk about other takeaways, which are more about the team itself, which is nice, and kind of just Frost's return to UCF and stuff that he's learned, I guess, in the recent years. And one thing I texted you about that I picked up a lot, I wouldn't say it's like something I picked up on as if I'm like a sleuth. Like, it was pretty easy. He talked about it 6 different times. He's been very big on surrounding himself with the right people and saying it's something that he learned a lot from Sean McVay when he was with the Rams. But I thought kind of what he had talked, I think it was when he was talking to Adam from Sons of UCF. I think what it was so interesting to me about that, and he kind of like almost gave perfect examples as to what he meant. He said he's been leaning heavily on Sean Clark, the offensive line coach, because he's been a head coach before and he's been through it. He said he's been leaning on Sean Beckton because of his experience at UCF and just in terms of being with UCF, and been leaning a lot on Kenny Martin because he was on the previous staff. He was here last year, and in the crazy transition that Frost had to deal with in that, period where he was hired and having to put everything together at once, he was a guy he could lean on because it was a guy from the previous staff. And I don't know, that was interesting to me, hearing him kind of give prime examples as to why he picked some of these guys and how they're already proving their worth to him as part of his staff.
Yeah. And honestly, the Sean Clark one in particular I liked because I think that was a hire that was probably my favorite of this offseason. Thought that was a really, really good pickup. I mean, it's hard to describe, like, I don't know. It's like, it's funny. You're saying all those names in my head. I'm like, Alex Grinch is also on the staff, but no, I do. It's funny. Like, the overall tone of that and a lot of the stuff is when Frost was here the first time, it was a really, really tight coaching staff. And obviously a lot of coaching staffs are close. That's not unusual in college football, but I mean, that was like a talking point of that team. And that was part of where, like, I feel like when people talk about culture and coaching and all that, it's sort of like, oh, well, Scott Frost and it's on down. It was, the culture started with that whole staff in 2016, 2017. And I think their bond and how close together they are, to the point that when Frost got the Nebraska job, he was like, I'm not going unless I can take every single coach with me, except maybe Troy Walters. Okay, fine. I guess we'll take him too. And it does feel like, and I don't want to overly read into comments, but it's like, just from everything we've heard, it seems like they're building that top-down culture again. And I think that's really cool. And I don't know what culture's worth these days in the NIL era. I really don't. But I think it's better than not having a good culture. And I think another thing that struck me too is whether it was Paul Rubelt or Nigel Lee Kelly or whoever, just the videos today and the interactions, they seem so tight with Frost. And everyone just seems loose and happy. And like, it just never quite felt that way with Gus. And I don't think the culture was bad under Gus. I think it was just different. And we knew what Frost culture was like, and kind of seeing from the comments he made and the players made, and also just even their interactions, it's like seeing that already kind of percolating again and coming back, even though they haven't played a game yet. That's cool. It's exciting to see.
Miles Montgomery talked a lot about it. I know he's talked about it on like the podcast he's been doing with Jaden Nixon, but he talked about it again today just because he was asked about what did he know about Scott Frost. And he was like, honestly, until he became a coach, like, I didn't know much about him, but he said he's the kind of coach you want to play for. And you hear that anytime anyone's asked about Frost, like, he's a player type of coach. It's because he's on the younger side. And he even said that. He was like, I enjoyed having a young running backs coach last year, and I have another young one this year. And Frost is kind of like that too, where he was, and he even pointed out, which I know has become a big talking point, pointed out the shoes that he was wearing with his suit today. And players love that kind of stuff. Like, he feels like he can relate to him. And the culture thing is interesting to me because you talk about, and I think I agree with you. I said it to you today. I'm worried this isn't going to work. And like you said, if we were to bet right now, it probably won't, but we'll see. It almost feels like the entire thing, and again, things can change with, now the rev share structure is now kind of in place, and we'll see what things bring next year in terms of building the roster and all that. But right now, if I were to guess, like, it feels like this working versus it not working is entirely dependent. Like, they're hedging everything on the culture. Like that, the culture is the thing that's going to make this work. And if it doesn't work, they went out on their sword, for lack of a better term, because culture is their thing. Like they're going to put that into place and build around that. And if it doesn't work, it wasn't enough. And it kind of proves almost that in this era, culture can only take you so far. So we'll see.
The great gamble they're making, which I don't even know if it counts as a gamble, because like, what's the alternative? Like, find money you don't have and spend insane amounts of it. Which, by the way, just for the record, rev share is in full swing here. I say full swing; it's been 8 days, but so far, like, if rev share sticks, like that cap actually becomes enforceable, then like UCF can financially compete with a lot of these other teams. So like that's still on the table. But the great gamble that they're making is that the culture is going to pay off. It's not about it is about right now, but like doing all this and having the great culture isn't for this moment here where it's the off season before the first season. Having the great culture is for 2 years from now, when Kane Archer has had an unexpectedly strong true freshman season as UCF's quarterback. I'm making an example here. As UCF's quarterback, and is getting all these big money offers, and he knows that he would take less to stay at UCF, but man, he loves it here so much and loves his coaches and loves his teammates and enjoys every day of his life so much that he has to think about if he wants to leave. And if you're listening to this and going, nah, they'll take the bigger payday, we see over and over again throughout college football that happens sometimes. And there's no culture that will stop UCF from ever losing players, but it doesn't happen all the time. Speaking of things a coach probably shouldn't say out loud, Iowa State's coach today said that all of their starters had to take a pay cut to remain with the team. Not a thing you want to say, like, shouldn't have said that out loud, but an example of Iowa State famously does not have a lot of money, but they have a very strong culture. Their coach has been there for a long time. They have
quarterback Josh Hoover at TCU. Like that's the prime example, I think, of this offseason, right?
He reportedly turned down several $1 million from Tennessee to stay at TCU. And again, TCU's paying him. He's not getting there, but he could have gotten a lot more to go to Tennessee. And it's like, that is the payoff of if you build and it has to be a successful culture. It's got to be a winning culture. But if you build the type of vibe that Frost has talked about, it's like it was like, it sounds stupid to say because it's so anecdotal, but like back in 2017 and even 2016 when they weren't winning, it's like just being out at Access or being out at practice. It's like everyone just kind of loved each other and it was fun. And you could tell that everyone liked being out there every day. And I think that in this era of college football, where many teams, especially the ones with money, are moving much more toward a business model of you're going to get X amount of money and we're going to expect X performance from you, being the place where players have a coach they love to play for and have a place where they love waking up and they love every day and they love being there and love the school and the fans and all of that. It's just all you can do if you can't afford to keep the players is make it as hard as possible for them to want to leave. That's the gamble.
And that's why I think, too, I'd be curious to know where else or if anywhere else this is happening, but why I think it was such a genius move to bring the program thing back into the mix and have the players in these situations where they're building bonds with guys that aren't in their position group and working on tasks together and kind of – because they're really like this is – and Frost said it today. I think he said there's like maybe 68 or 69 new players on this roster that were not here last year. So – you're trying to build a culture with a bunch of guys who don't know each other. I say a program like that's called the program. Doing that, it just, I don't know. It seems like a quick way to kind of build from the ground up, and that's what they're doing. And Miles talked about it on that podcast. He's talked about it today. One of the things where they're doing this is like a team exercise where they're all in the pool and they're having to tread water, and they're having to take off a hoodie while they're treading water. That, first of all, it sounds impossible, and I would never try that in a million years. But it's almost odd. It kind of seems like what they do with the program is like if they're forcing all the players to bond through shared trauma. Like if you put it that way, it sounds a little sinister. But
put it that way,
yeah, it sounds a little sinister when you put it that way. But I think that's part of what like they're building together is that they're going through hard times together and they're fighting through adversity. And it's I don't know. I think. That's why, I mean, that's not the only reason why, because I think Frost coming back, I was always going to root for him to succeed and for it to work. But I think that's why even going into a season where I don't think they're going to be very good, I'm getting some of the feeling back about UCF football that I didn't necessarily have in the last couple of years.
Yeah. Well, again, it all comes. The feeling didn't go away because we didn't like Gus's culture. The feeling went away because they stopped winning games, and that's the part I want to keep in mind. Because the other thing is, I don't want us to revision history too much to the point where the real culture problems. The last time this program had real significant culture problems, as far as we know, was the end of the Heupel era. Gus had to repair that, and he did similar stuff of trying to get the offense. Because remember how the whole thing was like two different teams under Heupel and Shannon, and they never spoke, and Gus had to try to repair that. I don't think the culture was bad under Gus. I think the culture eroded because they weren't winning, and Gus was clearly biased towards certain players, and that created, locker room issues and all of that stuff. Like towards the end, it was just sort of crumbling. I still don't think this is nearly as big of a job as Frost had in 2015.
No,
culture-wise.
No.
And that's great because he knows how to do that. And it's clear that he's already doing the same stuff again.
That's the other thing is too, like under Gus, like you said, I don't think the culture was necessarily a problem, and maybe it became one once they started losing. But I felt like, and he did have to repair things after the way things were in 2020. But it always kind of felt, it never felt like a point of emphasis the way it does with Frost right now. Like it was kind of all secondary, and that's why I do wonder, if it being a secondary thing, if it's easier for guys to end up, whatever, not necessarily the examples of like opting out in the middle of the season, all that stuff, but more so just when things go wrong, kind of being like, all right, well, we're gonna allow the culture to kind of disappear. I think when you're making it as big of a thing as Frost is and his staff is, it's a little harder to break down, but we'll see. I mean, it's all early days of this stuff.
Well, there's a couple of factors here if we want to talk about, if we want to just completely segue into the Gus culture, is that first off, Gus just flat and simple or plain and simple, and it's fine. I don't think he related to players on the same level that Frost did because he was like kind of another generation removed from them. He ran the program a little differently. You talked about how Scott Frost players are asked what they think about him, and they say, oh, he's so nice and we love him and we love being coached by him. We love talking with him. Whenever the players were asked the same questions about Gus over the last couple of years, it was always, oh, like, why do you like playing for Gus Malzahn? It was, oh, he won a national championship at Auburn. He's been around a long time. He has a lot of wisdom. It was Coach Cam Newton. It was never like, I just love talking with him about life around him, whatever, which is fine. There are different coaching styles. It's like when you play the freaking video game, you have to pick like a coaching archetype. Frost's archetype is culture. It's what he does. And I do think that it's just, if you don't have the money of the teams you're competing against, then you have to figure out what your leg up is going to be. And if that's going to be their leg up, fine. Other thing I want to bring up really quickly on the topic of money is, I just want to clarify. It's like, I feel like the myth continues to get propagated in part because they themselves keep saying it, that like UCF is overly poor or is like I feel like some fans are starting to get the idea that like UCF is poorer than like every other team in the country. And it's like, well, no, there's just an ecosystem above them, which like, fine. That's how it's always been. But we know that they fully funded rev share. Mahadra said that, I believe I can't remember when he said that, whether that was in his interview with Sons of UCF or beforehand. But around then. And also Matt Murschel tweeted that he spoke to Mahadra today. And so remember, rev share, if you're new or if you just tune out every time I talk about this because it's boring, which I understand, remember, rev share now is the cap. It's a salary that athletic departments can pay their players. NIL has gone back to supposed to be actual name, image, and likeness. You're not allowed to just give players money through NIL. It has to be cleared by the NIL Go clearinghouse. Mahadra revealed to Matt Murschel that 5 UCF athletes have already submitted NIL deals through the NIL Go clearinghouse. 4 of those deals have already been approved. The final one hasn't been rejected. It's just pending. And that one of those deals was for more than $10,000. So it's not like UCF's that's all outside of rev share. That's just good old fashioned, like business paying NIL. So like,
that's like 2020 NIL.
2020, what we thought NIL was going to be.
Yeah.
They're not broke.
They'll keep telling us that they are, though.
Did you see, by the way, MD, really quickly, not to derail this, but MD Knight 2016 on Twitter added us in a tweet. Did you see that?
I haven't. Should I go look, apparently?
It's a Steve Helwig tweet. Steve Helwig is a great follow, by the way, if you like college football. Cincinnati center Gavin Gerhardt says that UCF and Miami, Ohio are the Bearcats' 2 primary rivals. Quote, we take those weeks a little different.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a couple Miami, Ohio fans who seem upset that UCF is on the list there.
Well, I mean, okay. I don't know why. And I understand that's a much more storied and historic rivalry long term.
It's also an uncompetitive rivalry.
Yeah, but also I don't know.
Look, when I'm a Power 4 football team, it is perfectly fine for the team that I care most about beating to be the other Power 4 football team. All these dumb little worthless G5 schools like Miami, Ohio, or USF are not on the same level as the Power Four, and they just don't belong in these conversations.
I need you to not.
That was me giving it. That was me forsaking all of my principles to be mean to USF for one bit. But yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out to our main rival, Cincinnati.
It was funny because I was half watching when Scott Satterfield was talking because he talked right before Scott Frost did, and I was like, I don't know. I was like, this guy stinks.
That guy's not going to have a job by December, and I feel fully confident saying that.
He's not here for the long haul.
On the topic of me and my biases, though, I'm realizing, because one thing that I was really adamant with UCF fans was like, once you're in the Power Four, please don't become like every other Power Four fan and forget that there is good football at the G5 and that these programs do matter. And I 100% still feel that way. I still find myself watching a lot of G5 football, and there is a divide, like the way like even like Texas Tech or Kansas State fans talk about the G5 since they were never really a part of it. They're just so dismissive of it, and it's just wrong. Mm-hmm. That all being said, Brett McMurphy, who's now at On 3, by the way, posted a bowl projection article this past week. And in his bowl projections, he was kind enough to project UCF to a bowl, which bold. And he has them in the Cure Bowl against USF. And USF is like, they haven't been amazing, but like they're clearly on the upswing and like should have more potential than almost any other G5 team. And UCF is presumably going to be pretty bad this year. At bare minimum, like okay, or at their peak, okay. And I saw that projection, and I'm like, we would just run them off the field. Like,
you are a problem. You are like,
and I really believe that in my heart.
You're a genuine problem. You're a liability. You are a liability to this podcast. What's next? I mean, I don't know where to go from there. Kind of bouncing around a little bit. There was a little bit more that Frost. Okay. There was a little bit more that Frost talked about. I, again, predictably didn't say a whole lot on the QB competition. Kind of said the same thing that he said at the end of spring, which is he's waiting for somebody to separate. But he also did the coach speak thing where he's like, I've seen enough from each of them to where I'd feel fine going into week one with them starting. He's just like, nobody has really separated yet. And if I were a betting man, which I am sometimes, I would probably bet that no one's going to quote unquote separate themselves until maybe like a few days before.
And then suddenly
the opener, suddenly
like the third to last practice, the light will shine down.
Suddenly somebody's like a voice of somebody unseen is going to whisper into Scott Frost's ear, and it's like, that's the guy. And suddenly somebody will separate. But
are we close enough now that we can stop pretending like Taven isn't the starter? Like, can we just start being over about that?
I don't know if we are.
Have to do more like fall. We're going to do a fall camp podcast in a couple weeks, and we're going to be like, wonder who it's going to be.
They split the reps. They split the reps.
It would have been really, because they always, of course, you have to ask about that. And of course, he's not going to say anything because this is the way it works. But it's so funny if someone was like, Coach, how's the QB competition looking? And he was like, I mean, yeah, we're paying Taven the most, so it's going to be him at least in week one, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I don't really know what the argument is for not rolling with Taven. I think you would have had to really see Jakari or Cam, who I know then got hurt during spring. Like, because he's the guy you brought in and paid the money, like, I feel like someone would have to really outperform him. If they all just seem kind of the same, you probably have to roll them first.
That's the thing.
It changes, but
no one is going to separate probably until and even the 3 days before the game. No one will have separated. It's just the voice that I mentioned that will whisper into Scott Frost's ear is just going to be, I don't know, Mahajer, one of the player personnel people, just being like, we're paying Taven the most. It's like, all right, well, we got to roll with him, see how things go. I don't know. It's not.
I'm gonna like. It's like I'm just imagining in my head like Scott Frost calls all the quarterbacks like into like the meeting room. It's like Taven and Cam and Jakari and Davy Belfort, or whatever, and he sits them all down and he's like, all right, guys, here's the deal. I'm looking at the clock on that wall, and it is just 5 months until Kane Archer gets on campus, so I don't really care what any of y'all do. Just go out there and have fun these next 12 games. Do whatever you want.
And the quarterback competition I really care about is Kane Archer versus Dante Carr. That's what I care about. But
I care about Kane Archer versus Dante Carr versus Taven Jackson, who for some reason is still here and did just enough in 2025 to maybe have to be the starter again.
Yeah. All right. I think I kind of want to just skip over all the rest of what Frost said, because none of it else, other than the inflammatory things he said that we already discussed, there wasn't a whole lot else, and we got other stuff to get to.
We do.
I'm trying to think, is there anything else that he mentioned Nigel Lee Kelly was the best player in spring ball. Said he wrecked a few practices. He mentioned that Kelly Lawson, who they obviously brought, that was the one we talked about it being like somewhat of a surprise as far as who they brought to media days. And he said kind of Kelly as the Mike linebacker has to step into like a leadership role because that's what he's going to have to do on the field. So congratulations to starting Mike linebacker Kelly Lawson, I guess.
This is one of those things I can't remember. Do we I want to say a thing, but I can't remember if it's public or not.
All right, let's not.
Okay.
I'm erring on the side of caution and shutting it down.
One of the players Bailey's mentioned in that conversation may have had offers to go elsewhere and didn't.
Yeah.
That's not like, was that out there? I can't remember if that was out there or not.
Did he not?
No, this was later. This was like post-spring.
Okay, but he did enter the portal at one time.
I'm just saying, you want to talk about culture and you want to talk about players sticking around when they could be paying a lot more to be elsewhere. I'm just saying, maybe there's already some examples on the roster. Who knows? If that is out there and I just forgot that's been reported, then this just looks stupid. But like,
I don't know, man. I can.
But anyway, shout out to starting linebacker Kelly Lawson. Kelly Lawson, who like was like, I'm coming to UCF. I'm not coming to UCF. I'm coming to UCF. Like, it's just great that he's going to be worth it at the end of the day.
Going to start.
He came up in the news section on 3 straight podcasts. So I'm glad he's going to start.
Yeah, that's good. A couple other things. Just Miles McGomery talked about which has kind of surprised me. He was like leader. He said, I was never really like much of a guy who likes to talk. And I think he kind of had to like learn a lot about himself in order to become a leader. But I don't know. He seems so natural with it and he's like taken to it well. So that's been nice to see. He talked about what he learned from RJ, and he basically said, I'm just going to try to do everything that RJ did, basically. He said I'd be a fool not to, because that obviously worked out for him. And another thing that he mentioned to Adam on the Sons of UCF one-on-one, he said that UCF was his dream school. Is that something that we knew?
He's a Miles Montgomery?
Yeah, he's a Jacksonville guy. He said out of high school, UCF was his dream school. And I didn't ever remember that coming up before. I don't even know that I knew that he was from Jacksonville, which probably speaks to my lack of preparedness, but
big fan of a Cincinnati running back's dream school being UCF, by the way.
Yeah, it just makes me think like, well, why didn't they try to get him out of high school?
Well, that's what I'm trying to hold on. I'm trying to pull up his profile because I want to see who UCF's coach was when he was in high school. Because that's he was the class. Oh, you know what? He might have fallen through the cracks a little bit because he was class of 21. That was like the Hypo left after signing day, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so no, that was just once again Josh Heupel ignoring Florida. Never mind. Guys, I can't overstate. And again, it's one of those things where it's like enough years have passed, you can probably talk about it. It's like he just ignored Florida. Like all the high school coaches in Central Florida and South Florida and Northern Florida.
Seminole was the big one, right?
We don't hear from UCF. Yeah, Timmy McClain, like that whole situation was like bridges were getting burned with like important high school pipelines because Josh Heupel was like, well, I've consulted a globe and apparently there's a state called Missouri and we should see if they have players we might want. Instead of just being like, hey, you're in literally one of the top 3 most talent-rich states in the country by a mile and all the players from Florida like to stay home. So just grab some.
Because Gus came in and spoke to the Seminole head coach and the Seminole head coach was like, yeah, it was nice to hear from UCF again for the first time in years.
Man, there was, and we like, but there was the Athletic, I forget when, it was like a couple years into the Gus era, it might have been that first offseason, they like did like they used to do these like high school coach confidential things where they'd like talk with like a dozen or more high school coaches anonymously and just publish their quotes. And like all of them were like, yeah, we didn't hear from UCF for like 3 years. They just disappeared. And it's nice that they're back now.
One thing
say what you will about Gus, but at least he freaking repaired the relationships with basically every high school in Florida.
One thing on recruiting that I shouldn't have skipped over with Scott Frost, and we don't have to spend too much time on it because we just did our recruiting segment last week, but he said twice. At one point he said, like, just in terms of coming back to UCF, he said a place that had treated me so well, and he said I knew how easy it was to recruit there. And then he later on said, before that he had said the access to talent is greater, and those 2 quotes made me raise my eyebrow because I was just like, well, all right, well then what are we doing? Because we talked about it.
I know. And I'm trying to, because he also said during the presser, he said something along the lines of like, yeah, we can get better players now. Is that the quote? Is that the same quote?
I think so. He says that access to talent is greater or something like that.
No, it was something else. He said along the lines of, he was talking about last time. He was like, we can get better players now than we did then. I'm like, you recruited the best players in school history last time. So like, what do you mean by that? Like they've actively never had a roster anywhere near as good as the roster he put together. So like, I don't know if that was just coach speak, like we're in a power.
It probably was,
whatever, but
I'm sure it was a talking point.
Yeah, I don't know, man. That's like I said, maybe we're all being fooled. Maybe these players are going to come in and it's the exact same thing where it's all these guys no one's ever heard of and they're like the next generation of UCF legends, or maybe recruiting's just going poorly. Hard to say.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've kind of realized as we've been talking for, I think spent about 7 minutes on uniform. So for the last 38 minutes or so, we've been talking about media day, and I'm realizing how like negative it has made me feel. Where I'm just like, oh, like I didn't like a lot of the things that were said. Here's something I did like that was said. Nigel Lee Kelly. It was just honestly, it could have been like a throwaway line, but it resonated with me, and it will resonate with you too if you haven't seen it. It was something that UCF had posted, and they had asked him about. They asked him about the first time he came out in the bounce house, and I guess I need to go back and find the exact words that he said, because I sent them to you, and you said, "Did he say that?" And I was like, "Yeah." And it was something along the lines of it being nice that he had never had that many fans before, which is crazy because, well, I guess it's not that crazy if you've been paying attention, but it's crazy depending on who you pay attention to, because he came here from Miami. So that's a quote that I enjoyed. I enjoyed him saying,
what was the exact quote?
You and I have texted a lot today, and part of it is you sending me 6 million pictures of uniform.
Guys, I can't overstate like
there it
how
is.
Not a meme it is. I texted you so much about the gold.
Dude, I went this morning. I started my morning with a very long walk. And I was on my walk, and you were just texting me just close-up pictures of gold, and I'm just like, yeah, man, I don't know, it looks weird.
I think what's bad is like we moved on like 3 different times, and I just kept coming back to it, and like I knew I was seeming crazy, but like I just couldn't. God, it's actually bad. I'm looking through the text chain.
Finally, I replied, "Seek help," and you said, "I apologize that I can't let this go." Anyway, the Nigel Lee Kelly quote, which is how we got here in the first place. He said, "My first time in the bounce house, it shocked me because I'd never really had a fan base like that," which I just love hearing that.
I think it's great because I think, guys, it is July 8th, 2025. Miami has not been nationally relevant in a quarter of a century. I think it is okay to finally admit that they do not have fans. They have been a very good program. They have been one of the best programs in college football at certain stretches. They've won multiple national championships. All of that. They are a huge recruiting draw. I'm not here to tell you that UCF outdraws Miami in recruiting or whatever. They don't have fans. And the people on Twitter who are Miami fans did not go to Miami. Many of them don't even live in the South Florida area, and they don't go to the games. They don't have a stadium. I don't know how Miami is allowed to be considered one of the like top 20 programs in college football, and they play in the Dolphin Stadium with no people there. And if you need more proof, Nigel Lee Kelly, who is a very good player and played at Miami, came to UCF and said, "Whoa, this is what it's like when people support your team." So I'm done. I know that we can't talk a lot of trash right now because UCF is bad at football, but what the heck just happened to Bailey? There was a big noise in the background.
Yeah, it scared I don't know.
Everything good
really
there?
Bad. Everything's fine inside my apartment. I don't know
this
what
is going to go from
right
a sports podcast to a murder podcast really quickly. Wow, that's very loud. Okay. Yeah. Bailey's under attack. But yeah, shout out to Nigel Lee Kelly.
Just like a jump. That was scary.
I can't wait to go back on the YouTube video and look at your jump because I think I jumped because I've got my headphones in. It was loud too.
Dude, I don't know what that was. Something just fell down the stairs.
There's a Miami fan above you who heard that and got really mad. And
I don't know how they heard it, considering I'm wearing headphones that keep almost falling out.
He's realizing, he's like, "You mean I'm the only one?" But yeah. Miami fans, the 4 of them that exist are annoying. But seriously, it's so embarrassing they can't even come close to filling a state. Like they always announce attendance of like 40, 45,000, maybe above it. Then I have to go on Twitter and have Miami fans being like, "We have as many fans as you." Then I go turn on the game on TV and it's like the team and like about as many people who play for the team in the stands.
One of my favorite bits that you do is just take pictures of your TV screen when Miami's playing.
Every time I'm watching a Miami game, I wait for a kickoff and I take a photo and you get to see it. And it's like, and you know, it's great. It's great fun. It's great fun to see that non-existent fan base.
Yeah.
I hate Florida. I hate Florida a lot. And I wish nothing but poor things for their football program, but they have a really good fan base. You got to give them that. Florida State, passionate fan base. Miami does not exist.
Yeah.
Fake school.
Last thing from Media Day, the first day of Media Days anyway, which is, I think after today, I'm not going to care about Wednesday's media day at all. now that UCF is gone and Brett Yormark has given his remarks, I'm just whatever. Tomorrow's fine.
What non-UCF storyline did you care about the most, and why was it Chris Kleiman getting very angry at the suggestion that he's an Iowa or Iowa State fan?
He said, let me set something straight. And I forget, he said he grew up in Waterloo, Iowa. He's like, I was a Northern Iowa fan. I was not a fan of Iowa or Iowa State. And you and I were both like, is that an accusation he's been getting?
Felt like we were missing. That's Kansas State's head coach, by the way, if you don't know, who came up through the FCS ranks. So that maybe he's just, but yeah, shout out to him and setting the record straight on his fandom. Scott Frost set the record straight on his fandom too today. So it was really an interesting day for coaches and their alma maters and the teams they root for.
And Matt Campbell talked about how Iowa State has no money.
I cannot believe you. That quote way more damaging than anything Scott Frost said. You know how many other schools are going to show that to recruits now? Like, that was a wild thing to say out loud.
Yeah, was today a bad day for the Big 12?
I don't know.
I don't know. This was good from Brett Yormark. He spoke obviously to kick off the day, and I think the big takeaway was that he was doubling down. He said straight up, "I'm doubling down on the 5+11 model for the college football playoff." And he said on the Big Ten, or he was kind of shot at the Big Ten. He said, "We want to earn it on the field. We are not the NFL," which also kind of feels like a shot at the NFL.
I don't think that was a shot at the NFL. It's just Tony Petitti is trying to turn it into the NFL, and it's okay for college football to be different. Like it's okay to be separate properties. If you've forgotten, the very quick cliff notes are that they're still right now trying to figure out what the playoffs going to look like after this year. There are 10 FBS conferences. 9 of the FBS conferences want to do a 5+11 model where it's 16 teams. The 5 highest ranked conference champs automatically get in, and then there's 11 at-larges. That would allow all the Power 4 champs and a G5 champ to make it every year. The end, move on. One conference, other than the other 9, is the Big Ten, and the Big Ten thinks it should be 16 teams, but they think there should be auto bids. The SEC and the Big Ten, their top 4 teams go, and then the Big 12 and the ACC, their top 2 teams go, and then you get a couple more in from there. And the only reason they want that is because Tony Petitti, the Big Ten commissioner, who's unfortunately a moron who doesn't understand college football, believes that he has this whole grand vision to make like an NCAA tournament style thing for the Big Ten where like the top 2 teams automatically go to the playoff, and then they have this big play-in day where like 3 plays 6 and 4 plays 5 in these big matchups, which, like, if there's one thing that I think the college football postseason is missing, it's 8-4 Iowa with a playoff bid on the line in December. That's a game that I'd like to watch. No one agrees with him, and it's honestly great that he wants this because the Big Ten and the SEC have been like cozying up to each other and being all lovely and sort of moving towards shutting out the rest of college football entirely. But this has driven a big wedge in that because the SEC does not want this because they think it's dumb, and it is. But yeah, so it was cool to see Yormark. Yormark has really been leading the charge on 5+11 publicly. And I think what's cool about it, and it's a point he makes a lot, is how he has the opportunity right now to lock in that the Big 12 will get 2 teams in every year. They did not get that last year. There's a solid chance they don't get that this year. I think there is no way that 6 years down the road, which is the length of this contract, the Big 12 will have averaged more than 2 teams in per year. There's no way. So he is fully acknowledging that the Big 12 is going to leave spots out there that they could have otherwise secured for themselves in the name of this is better. This is what college football is supposed to be. It's better for everybody. Yeah. Every conference benefits from this because it's the model that makes sense, not the Big Ten's nonsense. So shout out Brett Yormark.
He did say today that he believes that they will get 2 this year. I don't know.
What's he going to say? I don't. Like someone asked him. You think he was going to be like, nah? Yeah, he wasn't. He wasn't going to be like, nah, man. He was going to be like, yeah, we stuck this year. I don't know. Like, I mean, what is he supposed to say?
Yeah, it was good to hear that from him. What I think we don't have to touch on it too much because you went on a rant last week, and I still fully agree with it. But he spoke about them doing away with the preseason poll and said something along the lines of like it actively hurt Arizona State last year, and that's why because they were picked to finish last, and obviously they went on to go to the playoff. And he was like, it hurt them throughout the year, which you went on your rant last week. If you haven't heard it, go toward the end of last week's podcast because it's just, I don't know, it's just dumb. It doesn't make sense.
Miles Montgomery, I'm sorry, we have breaking news coming in here. Miles Montgomery was asked to draw the UCF mascot.
I love at any level when they ask players to draw anything because they've done this with NFL rookies recently, and it's always hilarious.
This is going to be very low tech, but I'm just going to show my phone up to the screen. Get ready, Bailey. Are you ready? Get ready, listeners, if you're on YouTube.
Is that a snow cone?
I don't really know.
What's he done there?
I don't really know.
He hasn't even come close.
Yeah. So
that wasn't great.
I wonder how much of my room was reflected in the background of that, but it's probably fine.
I was wondering what you were looking at. I was like, I don't know.
if you're
incriminating things behind you.
Well, now I'm just like, well, it looks bad. I'm like, yeah, I got a coffee mug over there. I also just have a bunch of cash out on the counter. That's kind of weird. But yeah, if you were not watching on YouTube, I don't even know how to describe this. He tried to draw, I believe, the Nighthead logo, and we've got
which he has all lining the inside of his suit jacket today, which is really cool.
He drew what appears to be an ice cream cone with some kind of wafer chip sticking out of the ice cream. Again, can I say something else really quickly? I'm gonna ignore the other thing because we talked about that last week, and people don't agree with me, and I can't force you guys to be intelligent. Really can't. I try, but your brain cells are your problem. I was talking about this before. I love Miles Montgomery. I think he's awesome. I love all the content we see on him, and I'm just thinking about what a stark departure that was from the entire Gus era, because I like just him being able to develop a personality that UCF fans connect with and now like him outside of I mean, literally how many players could we have maybe loved that we didn't even know under the Gus era because they just weren't allowed to talk to fans or have a personality. And now it's like Miles is a guy who literally last year he was on the team. I didn't really think much about him one way or the other. And it's like, he's been such a presence this offseason on the podcast UCF's putting out in content, telling his story. It's like fans love him. That's cool.
Yeah. I can tell you right now, if you asked me at this time, well, I guess not this time, but even if you asked me at any point during the season last year, I would not have been able to recognize Miles Montgomery by face. Now I can.
Oh yeah, and same here.
It's just been a couple months of them putting out some content where he's been allowed to kind of, like you said, develop a personality. He's always had one, but at least put his personality on display.
Yeah,
and it's just such a departure from where things were we've talked about it at length on this podcast. Just that was part of what was special back in 2017, 2018. Like it was. You got to know the players more than just being players. And I think that's great that they're doing that. And I don't know, it's been nice kind of to see some of that content. And honestly, in some ways it hasn't made the off season easier to get through because college football off season is always so extremely long, but it's at least given us something, you know what I mean? Like in some of these lull periods and dead periods where we're just kind of like, gosh, I can't wait till we can actually watch games again. At least we're getting some content where we get to know the team and kind of understand who these guys are before we just see them on the field. I don't know, it just feels nice.
Yep, I agree. Second all of that.
Cool. Football news. We'll jump into that real quick before we get out of here. Shaquille Griffin re-signed with the Seahawks, which was cool to see. I told you before we got on here, I was like, I feel like that happened forever ago. Maybe it was just reported forever ago, and then he finally signed this past week, but I was like, let me just throw that in the news. And it's cool to see him back with the Seahawks. 3-star defensive lineman Jaden Curtis committed to UCF last week. So that's a pretty good one. I know he's a 3-star. Is he a high rated 3-star? Because I know you had mentioned to me, we kind of UCF not beat out, but staved off Ole Miss from making a late.
So he's from Mississippi. Most of his offers and everything had been with lower level G5 teams, and then UCF got in on him. And I was reading the Ole Miss 247 site, and just in the last few weeks, Ole Miss got heavily involved with him and was really trying to make a push for him. And he'd said that it's funny. He gave an interview with the Ole Miss 247 site, and a few weeks ago, he was like, "I'm not close to a decision." He's like, "Ole Miss and UCF are my top two, but I'm not planning to make a decision anytime soon." Then 3 days later, he was like, "UCF." So that UCF beat out Ole Miss for a Mississippi kid. Not super highly rated, but if you want to talk about convincing me that Frost is going to go find guys and the staff, I say Frost, the defensive player, but you know what I mean? That they were going to go find guys. That's how you do it. The fact that they found this guy was getting no offers and Ole Miss picked up the scent on him right after implies that there's something there. So yeah, that was cool to see.
I'll also always feel like anytime they get a defensive lineman and they beat out, I'm much like Kenny Martin's the best, and he needs to.
Kenny Martin's awesome, and the best decision Frost has made so far was retaining him. Absolutely right call.
We spoke a little bit earlier about the war on I-4 and your departure from everything you've ever said about the Group of Five and your morals and all that. But The Athletic ranked the top 100 rivalries in college football this week, and the war on I-4 came in at 97, which was just behind all the MAC rivalries, which I guess was just one entry. Did you look at that list?
Yes, I read the whole article. Well, I didn't read the whole. There were blurbs for each one. I spent a lot of time in that article. Do you ever get one of those? I don't want to offend anybody because own what you're into, but you ever get those people in life, say with wine, right? I'm the type of guy there's red and there's white and whatever, and I wish I was the type of person who could do all the palate stuff Like, like I'm really impressed by people who can like sip a glass of wine or like, oh, this was aged in like a French barrel of whatever the hell. Like, I don't know. Those people are fascinating to me. I think it's cool. Not this new guys. I wish I had that skill. That rivalry ranking felt like a college football writer trying to show us that he is the wine taster of college football, because it was a stupid list where it seemed like he was more just trying to show how knowledgeable he was versus an actual good list. There were I am by any metric you can establish, I'm in the 99th percentile of college football fans. I assume you are too, Bailey. Mm-hmm. There was stuff on the list I've never heard of in my life.
Yeah. I don't know. I did kind of like, I skimmed through the whole thing again. Like I didn't read each blurb, but there were some on there that I was just like, all right, like we are. Really,
what are we doing?
We're showing off here.
What are we doing? That literally, yeah. Like it's like I'm so knowledgeable. Like it was not a real list of the top 100 rivalries.
It almost read like in some ways like the writer was just like, well, let me just look up some like really historic rivalries that I can throw in here. And I didn't know that. I mean, like, cool, yeah, they're historic rivalries, but I knew nothing about them, and that doesn't make them bad rivalries.
But ranking a rivalry between two teams that combine for 6 fans is like a top 50 rivalry just doesn't make sense. I'm sorry, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Also, another blow was struck because it's rivalry week at the Athletic, and Chris.
Oh, is that why they're doing all this?
Yes, and Chris Vanini published the top 25 names of rivalries in college football, and UCF War on I-4 was not even an honorable mention, unfortunately. I like the War on I-4 name. There are some. That one doesn't bother me that much because there were some. I was a little annoyed, and then I started reading the list. I'm like, hey, these are some really cool names.
Yeah.
So that's a tough.
What's always funny to me is like I don't know if we talked about this on the podcast or not, but like when did the War on I-4 name get like labeled?
Longer ago than you think.
Because when I was growing up, I didn't know as much about, I guess, the UCF USF rivalry. And it was the Tampa Bay Storm and the Orlando Predators in the Arena League. They used the War on I-4. That's the first time I ever heard of the War on I-4. Was that?
I may be Mandela affecting myself, but I swear I remember being called that when I was a little kid.
I don't know. It definitely could have been. I just don't. That like the first time I ever heard.
I feel like that term predates them playing. I don't know.
Really?
I don't know. We got to get a UCF historian in here.
Your father.
Yeah, I'll have to ask him. He would know, actually. We need to do like phone a friend. Not be like, when did it? Yeah. I don't know. I feel like it predated games being played, but I'm not sure. I know it officially became that in 2016 when they both agreed. Yeah, but that was ridiculous. They've been playing for almost a decade at that point, and we're just didn't like each other.
All right, pick that portal player.
Pick that portal player. This is our weekly segment where I torture Bailey and he questions whether he should be my friend. A little behind the scenes. I don't know if I can. I don't know. I hope I'm not like outing. Adam from Sons UCF sent me. He was making some clips from our episode where he had Eric DeSalvo.
Oh.
And Bailey was a little mad at the end of the podcast, and the clip thing picked up his comments and made the caption "Bailey's podcast rage: Why we might quit." And I feel like that's your vibe every time we play Pick That Portal Player.
Yeah, I can't wait till. What did this replace? Tweet of the week. Can't wait till Tweet of the week comes back.
So guys, Tweet of the week will be, and there were many today that could have made it. Tweet of the week will be returning with the regular season. It was just kind of a dead time, and it just felt like I was struggling too hard every week. So Pick That Portal Player will be with us for a little bit longer. Bailey, are you ready for Pick That Portal Player, where I give you 3 facts about a player and you pick them? That's not really what it is, but you know what I mean. You're listening. Sure. You know what the deal is. All right.
Sure.
This player has appeared in 10 games for UCF. He has 916 career all-purpose yards, including 8 touchdowns. He has played for a UCF rival.
See, you told me before today's episode that you were going to take it easy this week, and then I said I'm just going to gaslight myself into thinking you're lying to me.
I actually have already. This isn't even the player I picked when I said that, because I decided what I was going to do initially was too mean. So I switched to this during the podcast.
Say the second one again.
916 career all-purpose yards, along with 8 touchdowns.
916 career all-purpose yards with 8 touchdowns. Played for a UCF rival.
Yes.
We're
gonna need a guess, Bailey. We're gonna need a guess.
Oh no! I'm gonna be mad because I'm probably
I felt this was easy, personally, but,
Hold on.
I'm willing to bet there's a couple listeners who know it.
Huh?
I'm willing to bet listeners have figured this one out.
I have a guess, but I'm afraid that I'm dumb.
Go ahead.
Miles Montgomery.
Miles Montgomery. Good job. You got one.
Oh. I don't like that you've put me in this position that you can give me something as easy as that and make me think, well, my one of my best friends in the world is actually an asshole, and he's just going to try to make me look foolish.
What I initially was planning to do when I told you earlier that it was easy was, I'll just say it because I don't think I'm going to do it because it's too mean, but I was going to do DeMarcus Bowman. And my first hint was I was just going to say DB for his initials, but make you think I meant he's a DB and then throw that in your face at the end.
I would have had issues there.
So I toned it down.
Like we're ending with me getting one right and me still being mad at you.
I love that we're like 4 weeks into the podcast, just ends with you just pissed. Like it's like my favorite thing.
It might be my least favorite part of the week. That specific segment.
Tweet of the week will be returning in like 7 episodes. We're close.
50 days.
Yeah, we're close.
Well, I guess fewer than that. But
you only have to pick like 6 more players.
Sure. We took a week off. Like I was keeping track of my record for a while, and then we took a week off, and I completely lost it. So I don't even know.
I think you're 1-4-1, 1-3-1, but I'll double check.
Wait.
No, you're 2-3-1.
Yeah, I just got one.
Yeah, it should be.
Have we really only gotten one other one?
I think so. I think you got the first one, and then it's all been downhill because then I started getting really mean about it.
Yeah, and then I know the 2, 3, and 1. Like the one in that is like one that you gave me like an extra little helper.
Yeah, I did. So
yeah,
it'll be
whatever. I hate this. I can't wait till it's over. I'm talking about the segment, not the podcast. But podcast is over for this week. We will be back next week with episode 276. Until then, you can find us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at @ByCASimmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. Thank you guys so much for being with us. We will talk to you soon.
Bye, everybody.